Welcome to the Chapter 7 podcast. This is on Section 7.1, which is Life is Cellular. It's all about cells. So let's get started here. First thing we want to talk about is that the fact that it was hard to even know that cells even existed because there was really no instrument to figure it out. And that all changed with the invention of the microscope. And the person who first used a microscope was a man named Robert Hooke. And it was a compound microscope, which means he uses several lenses. And he looked at cork. And the cork, he saw these little tiny empty chambers inside the cork. And he thought they looked like rooms so he called them cells, which is what people call these small little rooms. And cells are the basic units of life. Here's a picture of Hooke's drawing of the cells, and you can see they're small little, looks like small little spaces. And at the same time, a guy named Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who was Dutch, used a single lens microscope to look at pond water. And he discovered that there were a lot of tiny little living organisms inside that. And that's me in Delft, Holland, at Anton van Leeuwenhoek's grave, which I visited about maybe 10 years ago. I was there. So what is the cell theory? So let's go through the history of the cell theory. We had several men who figured this out. Matthias Schleiden concluded that all plants were made of cells. Theodor Schwann stated all animals were made of cells, and Robert Virchow concluded that new cells were created only from the division of existing cells. And these discoveries are basically what the cell theory is about. Cell theory states all living things are composed of cells, and that includes plants and animals, obviously. They're the basic units of structure and function of living things, and they're produced from existing cells. Here's a t-shirt with a lot of those guys on the t-shirt itself. So, this section I'm going to run through real quickly. It's about new technologies, and we're talking about electron microscopes, which really bring out detail. That's the head of an ant, and they're much more effective at seeing things than light microscopes. And you can only visualize non-living preserved cells and tissue. You can't look at actual living things. So, in some ways, they're limited in their use, but the detail is amazing. And we have transmission electron microscopes. I'm not going to spend too much time on the scanning electron microscopes. That's a picture of a kidney stone, showing the jagged edges. And this one produces three-dimensional images, and it has some advantages over the TEM. Here's a scanning electron micrograph of neurons. We talk confocal light microscopes, ones that use lasers, and here's a picture using a laser one. You can see it helps with you can actually get some 3 dimensions with it. And then a scanning probe, actually you can look at single atoms. And this is actual DNA, which you can't get much smaller. You can get it slightly smaller than DNA. So now let's get on to the real important thing: prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So we're going to talk about cells and put them into 2 broad categories. All cells are surrounded by a barrier called a cell membrane. They'll at some point contain DNA, and they're classified into 2 categories. And the 2 categories are depending on whether they contain a nucleus. And here's a nucleus right here in the center of the cell. The nucleus is a large membrane-enclosed structure, and it contains the cell's genetic material in the form of DNA. And here you can see a drawing of a cell, and here's the rest of the cell. Here's the nucleus inside, and here's the DNA. And this cell is from this drawing is from a very long time ago. And the nucleus also acts like a control center, in that it controls many of the cell's activities. Here's pictures of 2 cells. So here's the important one. Eukaryotes are ones that contain nuclei. That's one type. And then prokaryotes do not contain nuclei. On this side right here, you have a prokaryotic cell, and there's no nucleus here. And then here's a eukaryotic cell, and you can see that purple thing right there, that's our nucleus. So let's look at the characteristics of the two of them. Prokaryotic cells have genetic material, in other words, DNA or RNA, that is not contained in a nucleus. That's really truly the most important thing to remember about them. They don't have membrane-bound organelles, and we'll talk more about organelles in the next section. And they're generally smaller and simpler than eukaryotic cells. And let me just back up just a little bit here. If you look at this picture, you can see this is 0.1 to 10 micrometers, and this one starts at 10 to 100 micrometers. So you can see that the eukaryotic cell is much bigger. The smallest eukaryotic cell is as big as the biggest prokaryotic cell, and it can be 10 times as large as the largest prokaryotic cell. And example of prokaryotes are bacteria. So eukaryotic cells contain a nucleus, and that's where you find the genetic material is, and it's separated from the rest of the cell. And here's our nucleus right here, and you'd find the genetic material inside the nucleus. They're generally larger and more complex than prokaryotic cells. They have dozens of structures and internal membranes. These are organelles, and you can see these little blue dots and this red squiggly thing right here. Those are all organelles, and they're highly specialized, meaning they have a purpose. Muscle cells have the purpose of contracting so that they can be part of a muscle. Nerve cells have the purpose of being able to send signals. Some cells are able to carry oxygen. Some cells are used to fight off infections, so they're specialized. And plants, animals, fungi, and protists are all eukaryotes. So on to the section quiz.